I'm Gray Parks, your host, and we're going to do another Who's Who this morning. And we have Ambassador Theresa A. Tull with us. She's our guest, and her friends call her Terry. She has an interesting career to talk about today, and after watching our program, if you'd really like to know more about her, you can go on the internet and Google Theresa A. Tull, and you will get an interview with the State Department. It's a long interview and a very, very interesting one. And I really encourage you to do it. Then, if you'd like to, there's another one that you might look at, and that is the Village in Motion that we had in March 23rd of 2016. And she talked a lot about her being the ambassador to Guyana and Brunei. And also you will get to see a lot of the beautiful things that she brought back from some of those places because they show them during this interview. So I would encourage you to do that too. And Terry, I want you to know that I am very, very pleased that you came on Who's Who today. And I've read your interview, and I was very impressed with you as a person, and I'll go into it later, but let's talk a little bit about your early family, your family and your siblings. Any special stories about them? How many siblings did you have? And
I'm the youngest of 7, and there's only 6 left. 1 left now. Okay. They've all passed already, except for one brother. And my father died when I was about 10 years old, but my mother was so strong and encouraged us all to just keep reaching for whatever it was we wanted. And one of my brothers was a career naval officer. He retired with the rank of commander. The brother who is still with me is, he has his PhD from Notre Dame. He was in the Air Force during the Korean War. One of my brothers who passed away 3 years ago. Again, most of these are people who worked their way through college in various ways. Yeah. And
I gather you had little money after your dad left.
Very little, almost non-existent.
Yeah.
It was non-existent, basically. But this other brother, then Jay, he was a super achiever also, very wonderful person, great sense of humor. But he became a social worker, and he ended up being in charge of the social work program for the county of Camden, New Jersey. And he got his master's at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, again at night. And what do I have? Let's see. My brother Jack went into real estate and got his own firm going. And his children have taken it over after his death. So they all, thank God. My 2 sisters, they were housewives, but not, they didn't just sit on a log, you know. They did a lot of stuff, you know.
Good
they were good people, but they didn't get college education. That wasn't what the deal was. But the rest of us did. We just struggled and got the education.
You, in your early elementary school, you had a little problem in the kindergarten with the teacher, and you were Catholic, and you were going to a Catholic school, but then you were taken from that school because of some problems. In public school, you found a niche in elementary school. In high school, you went back to the Catholic schools, and but in college, you really didn't get to go to college initially, huh?
No, I graduated from high school when I was 16, and went right to work literally the day after I had graduated. I had started the job part-time before graduation, and worked at a law office for a while, actually about 2 years, I guess. But one of my older brothers, Jay, the one who became a very successful social worker, he was going to night school at Rutgers to try to get a degree, and I thought, I didn't know about night school. So I kind of followed his lead, and I went to Rutgers at night. They had a branch in Camden. So I went there for quite a while and saw that I kind of stumbled across an article in, of all things, Good Housekeeping magazine.
Ah.
People were wondering, how did you get in the Foreign Service? Well, this article was talking about career opportunities for women in the Foreign Service. And I thought, So I sent away for information, got the information, and pursued it from that point on.
So that your motivation then to get in the Foreign Service was derived from that article, and you learned more about it? Is that?
Well, I learned that it was possible that way.
Yeah.
But I had, before that, and I was very interested in serving abroad, learning more about foreign cultures.
Oh.
I thought I would probably teach, get my college degree and teach. And I was very interested in Southeast Asia. And all of a sudden, here's this opportunity. I thought, all right, I'm going to pursue this.
Okay.
And see what was what.
Well, so what was the path on for you getting into the Foreign Service?
Well,
you're not a college graduate at this time, and I presume you had to be a college graduate?
Well, I tell you, it was very, I think I was one of the few over an extended period of time who was admitted without a college degree.
So it didn't specify that you had to be a college graduate?
No, but it said you would have the
test.
What was the phrase that they used? That you would be best prepared with a liberal arts education or economics or something like that.
Yeah.
But it didn't say you had to have had the degree. So what did I know? So I was going to night school in Camden, and I was occasionally dating one of the professors, and he was encouraging me, and he said, "You don't have to wait till you finish this up." He says, "You could pass that exam right now. You don't have to wait." And I said, "Huh?" He says, "No, what do you have to lose?" So I signed up to take the written exam. It was a very lengthy written examination. In those days, it was about an 8-hour written exam.
Oh, boy.
And I took it and passed. And he was pleased. He said, "I knew you would pass. Fine." So then I went to New York City to our mission at the United Nations for the oral examination. And I have to say the panel of senior Foreign Service officers they were very nice, but they were a little startled that I had gotten to this point I had at that point about 60 college credits. And they were just kind of puzzled. And they said, "Well, you should have a college degree. We're not requiring it, but we don't want to discourage you. We encourage you to try this again." Well, I went home utterly crushed, took the bus back to New Jersey. And my mother, God bless her soul, she was saying, "Well, they said try it again, so try it again. And you could only do it once a year." And I said, "Nah, they were just being nice." She says, "No, they weren't. So what do you have to lose? A day taking the exam." So I said, "Well, all right, I'll take the exam again just to prove the first time wasn't a fluke." So I took the test, passed it with a slightly higher grade. And then I said, "Okay, well, I'm not going to bother going up to New York for another interview for the oral exam. Forget that. They clearly want you to have a college degree." And at the rate I was going, it would have taken another 4 years at night. And again, my mother, who was going to be left alone, because I was her baby, and the others in the family were all married, she said, "No, what do you have to lose? Again, another day out of your life, go up there and do it." So I did. And it was a totally different atmosphere, totally different test and panel. And so I just did the best I could. And when it was over, they said, "Well, we want to welcome you to the Foreign Service." I said, "Huh?" I was absolutely stunned. Stunned because, I thought I'd done fine the year before, but hadn't. But I think it was the tenacity of it that they appreciated, because their record showed that I had been encouraged to try again, and I had, and there I was with a slightly better grade. And it was just very interesting.
Yeah, you demonstrated that you really wanted to be in the Foreign Service by taking
Yeah.
it again.
Absolutely.
So that I suspect that impressed them too.
So the tenacity was there, and of course my grades in college, to the extent that I had only had less than half of the college course, they were top notch, straight A's and all that. So at any rate, that was that. So I then went back to New Jersey, and I guess a couple of months later I went to Washington. I quit my job in Philadelphia and went down to Washington and started my career.
Well, let's jump ahead now. Your first job was in Chicago as a passport agency. Then
Right.
you went to Belgium.
Belgium, yes.
And again, you're there in the consular services, but don't you get a chance to do other things there?
Yeah, I wasn't a consular officer there.
Okay.
No, I was a trainee foreign service officer.
Okay.
And in those days, they don't do it anymore because it's too expensive for the State Department. They need consular bodies.
Sure.
But in those days, it was you would spend roughly 6 months in each of the 4 major sections of the embassy. So consular, administrative, political, and economic. Mm-hmm. So that's what I got to do. And of course, I knew before I went, I wanted political work, wanted to be in the political section.
Why did you want to be in the political?
Because it's so interesting.
Yes, all right.
Absolutely.
And you didn't have an economics degree, so you really had to have an economics degree, I would think.
Nah, not really.
Not really?
I worked in economics later in my career.
Okay.
I mean, you learn what you have to learn. Like when I was ambassador to Guyana, they had a complete overhaul with the International Monetary Fund, and I was very deeply involved in that. But no, it was just a very interesting time there in Brussels. But I knew going in that I did not want to do consular work. I wanted to be a political officer. And at that time, most women officers, the few there were, either were assigned to consular work or personnel. And I didn't want either of those, but you have to,
You have to sort of work your way.
you have to pay your dues in each of the
That's right,
sections
yeah.
there. And it was a good exposure to the overall work of an embassy. They don't do it now because it's too costly. You go in as a young FSO, new FSO, whatever age, and you're put in for 18 months into a consular slot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they need the bodies for that.
Well, in Belgium, you got the desire to go to Vietnam, or was there something? What caused you to decide you wanted to go to Vietnam?
Well, I had always been interested in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And in that particular time, our involvement in Vietnam was the #1 priority in foreign policy. And so I was very interested in that. I didn't volunteer for it,
No.
but when my assignment came up, I was assigned to Vietnam, to the consular section.
Okay.
Oh, God, no. But I was fortunate in that I had gotten to know very well the political counselor at Brussels. And he took an interest in my career, and he said, "Do you have onward orders?" I said, "Yeah, I'm supposed to go to Saigon in the consular section." He says, "Oh," because he really liked my political work when I was working
Okay.
with him. He says, "Oh, I don't know about that." I said, "Well, that's what I got to do." He says, "Well, I'll see what I can do about it when I go back to Washington. But if I can't change it, would you go as a consular officer?" I said, "Yes, I would." But he says, I'll talk to personnel when I get back. And he talked to personnel, and I was assigned to the political section. And I think I was the first woman assigned to that section in years, if not decades, And I did get over as a political officer.
So then you had to take the Vietnam language school.
Yeah.
And then you went to Saigon.
I got to Saigon 3 weeks before the Tet Offensive in 1968.
And that was you. In the 3 weeks, I assume that you didn't get any indication in terms of going to be an attack.
Well, not at my level.
Yeah.
God, I was a brand new political officer
that's-
there.
that's
We
what
were
I was-
monitoring what was going on. I don't think anybody had a clue about that. It
my
was a
impression,
total
too.
shock,
Yeah.
a total surprise.
So what
And,
was your first awareness of something was happening?
Well, I was billeted, that's a phrase you as an Army man would recognize, in a hotel in downtown Saigon. Yeah. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, I heard gunfire outside my window. And I thought, well, is it firecrackers? Because that was a traditional way to celebrate Tet, which was their major holiday. And I very cautiously peeked out the window. No, it wasn't firecrackers. So the shooting continued off and on.
So you could see people shooting down on the street?
I could hear it. I couldn't see it.
I
could hear it. The VC, Viet Cong, were trying to take the naval headquarters, which was around the corner from my hotel. And so naturally in the morning I put on the radio, the TV to hear what was going on, and was told, well, then I went, told that the city was under attack. So I went up to the rooftop restaurant in the hotel, which was closed, and I could see then I could see APCs and tanks rumbling through the street, and I could see fire, smoke and stuff like that. And at that point, 2 newly arrived Army majors came up to join me, and they were startled to see this relatively young woman there. What was I doing? So we introduced ourselves, and then we decided that we didn't know how long this was going to go on, and there was a restaurant across the street that was open. So the 3 of us kind of dashed across the street and had a meal, and then back to the hotel where I stayed. But then about just a few hours later, there was an announcement saying all embassy personnel should report to the embassy. I said, well, okay. Looking at the street, and, still hearing shooting and stuff. But there was a hotel around the corner. Well, a hotel, I guess it was, but more like an apartment complex. Mm-hmm. And I knew that a couple of secretaries from the political section were staying there. So I beat it around the corner and went in to see them. And they were petrified. We all were not too happy. But 2 U.S. Information Agency officers came in to see us. And they were antsy. They wanted to get out in the street so bad, and yet they had not been told. It was only embassy personnel. So they said, we have a Jeep, we'll take you to the embassy. That gave them an excuse, they thought. And I thought, well, fine. I just said, if I'm going to do this, I'd rather go in the Jeep with two strong American men. So we did. We went up to the embassy and saw there were still some Viet Cong bodies still in the garden of the embassy.
So they got through the wall, but they didn't get into or did they get into the embassy?
No, they did not get into the embassy. Yeah. Did not. Now, the embassy was one building, but halfway down the street there was the consular building. It was a separate building, and I believe, although we'd have to check their records, I think maybe 1 or 2 VC did get in there briefly, but they never got into the embassy, never. And contrary to what you might have read at the time.
So you got a little excitement there at the very beginning.
Oh yeah.
And your next you spent 2.5 years at that.
Right.
Most from the Army, we only spent 1 year, but here you are. You spent 2.5 years.
Right.
And you had, but you came home and let's see, what did you do? You went to.
When I came back, initially I was assigned to the Vietnam Working Group in the State Department. And so I worked on Vietnam from the State Department angle from Washington. Worked on it there.
And so you were able to give them your experience of 2.5 years there in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting.
Then you went to the University of Michigan, got your master's in Southeast Asia Studies.
Right.
And back to Da Nang.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And what were you doing in Da Nang?
I was deputy principal officer at our consulate general.
Now, just where is Da Nang in Vietnam?
Well, at that time it's central Vietnam, but it was the northernmost.
The northernmost province.
Northernmost well, province is pushing it a bit.
We call them areas, I guess, or
No, it was a military region.
yeah,
military region.
MR1.
It was MR1.
Yeah.
So I went there as a deputy principal officer. And it was an interesting time, I'll tell you.
Well, this was in 1973, so peace had not been declared when you got there, had it, or had it?
Well, we had just negotiated the so-called peace agreement with North Vietnam,
Okay.
for which Kissinger and his Vietnamese counterpart got the Nobel Peace Prize because they had ended the war. Well, that didn't last very long, as we could see, because the North Vietnamese chose not to abide by it. But now it's a little hairy, to tell you the truth.
Now, what was your job in Da Nang?
Well, I was the deputy principal officer, helping you run the post.
Okay.
And we had, we had a fairly, it was like a mini embassy with the various sections. We had an aid group, we had an economic group, large consular section, the whole bit. And I was number 2
Okay.
in the embassy, in the congen.
So we had
Consulate
a fair number of people then up at Da Nang. In the
Yeah,
embassy.
at this point,
Yeah.
we had reduced the presence somewhat,
Yeah.
but now we still had a fairly substantial number, and spouses. The spouses were there too, and
Oh.
that made it fun when the time came to think about the evacuation.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've run into that too in a few places where it's
yeah,
it creates a major problem with a lot of spouses, especially.
yeah, right. Well, the highlight, as far as I'm concerned, of my tour in Da Nang was that I developed an extremely close relationship with the Vietnamese Corps commander,
Oh.
Lieutenant General Ngo Quang Trung, who was a superb individual, as honest as the day is long, highly, highly commended by American counterparts such as General Schwarzkopf, who had worked with him there, and we worked very, very closely together. I was curious when I went because I thought, how is this general going to feel about this woman coming in, the deputy? And he was perfect. And the boss then, the then consul general, decided that I would go to the military staff briefings every day except Saturday. He decided he would go Saturday.
Oh.
And then he would have a private talk with the general afterwards. But I went all the other days, so I started my day at Military One headquarters, region headquarters, and seated right next to General Trung as he got his reports from all the various colonels and stuff, and reporting on what had happened the night before, what was going on. He just was super. He just accepted me, and we just developed a very, very good professional and then later personal relationship. He was just a gem.
So by attending those daily briefings, you really were in on all of the military activities that was going on in MR1.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Got a full report.
And I would
Every
assume
day.
maybe there was some information that came from other military regions also that were briefed to General Trung. You said,
Trung. Well, it was principally what was happening at MR1.
Yeah.
He didn't get a lot of stuff, what was going on at the other. I guess if he got it, fine, but it was not a feature of the daily briefing.
well, we're running out of, 28 minutes doesn't last very long. You were asked by General Trung to take care of his children in the
Actually, his wife asked me.
his wife asked you. Okay.
Yes.
Which said they really trusted you.
Yeah, but also it also said to me that she was very nervous. I mean,
I'm sure.
this was at the end. This was like
yeah.
April '75, getting close to it. And she asked me as I was going into a farewell dinner that he was giving for me. And I sat down at the table. I spoke Vietnamese. Of course he did. But right across the table was our CIA station chief who did not speak Vietnamese. So I told General Trung, I said, Mrs. Trung has just asked me if I would take your children to the United States when I leave. And I was going to leave very soon. And I told her that I would. And I looked at him and he said, thank you very much. And that told me, okay, my assessment that everything was going down the tube was accurate. And the children have enriched my life so much. They're just great, really great.
Yeah, your description of them, playing piano and all, they really were a great bunch of kids. There's
They're
three
super.
of them.
They're
And they
really
kept
super.
the other two children, the older one and the younger one.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, we're down to 2 minutes. You know, I can't believe it.
Well, I'm a talker. So.
Well, you may be a talker, but you're also a woman of action, as I would say it. And you, from Da Nang, you went around the world with a friend.
Right.
And by going around the world, you'd come from Washington to Vietnam, and now you just continued on.
Yeah, I
around
went via Asia the first time,
Yeah.
and then we went home the other way.
Which was
Meantime.
several people did that. That was
was
a
great.
good way to do it. You
So
know?
it's a trip around the world. It was fun.
Absolutely.
I've done it.
All right. Well,
Yes.
you had a wonderful career. You went on to become the charge the affairs in Laos. And it was a communist. And that was about 3 years or so that you were there.
Close to 3. Yeah.
And you had a lot of things happening in Laos.
You know, to me, the highlight of my career in Laos, almost the highlight of my career, was organizing, getting the Lao government to agree to the first joint crash site excavation, so we could get our people, military, in to go out to the jungles and try to recover the bodies of our airmen who had been shot down during the war.
And your ability to organize that was remarkable too.
That was a good time.
Well, you went on. I marvel at your way of going between things, where you you left as charge d'affaires, and they didn't have a job for you as an ambassador or a deputy or anything like that. So you said, well, how about going to the senior seminar, which I assume was a group of people that you did wonderful. You did interesting things at senior level, and got to.
Right, and it was sort of I hate to say it, a parking lot. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But it was a place where, if the anticipation was that you would be going to a higher level, it was a beautiful year, and it reacquainted you with what was going on in the States. We did a lot of traveling in the United States to kind of get us fresh.
So then you went on to and became an ambassador at Guyana, and you became an ambassador at Brunei. And you retired in 1996. And you lived happily ever after, huh?
More or less. What can you do?
I would like to explore why you came to Green Spring, but we're almost out of time. Was there some criteria that you had that caused you to come to Green Spring?
Well, I decided I was looking ahead.
Yeah.
And other than my Vietnamese children, who are wonderful, and I don't want to saddle them, I don't have children, no husband, and I was looking down the road and thinking, I have this wonderful group of nephews and nieces, and I didn't want one of them to get a phone call one day saying, your aunt has collapsed on the floor of her apartment, what do we do? Mm-hmm. So I thought, no, I'm going to research. So I checked out a place in New Jersey, and then I thought, no, I'd really rather be close to Washington. And I decided that Green Spring was it. So I came over a couple of times and then decided on this. And I'm fortunate. I have a nephew who lives right next door with his family. That wasn't my criteria, but it's been wonderful.
I hope you've enjoyed it here.
Yeah.
You good?
Yes, I have. Okay. I have enjoyed it.
By God.
Right.
All right.
No.
Thank you, and we're delighted to have you. You know?
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being on the program this morning.
Well, thanks for having me.
And I'm sorry, we almost need another hour, and I knew this was going to happen.